So I have a confession to make. I have never been a fan of Bayonetta.
That's blasphemy.
The character designs never appealed to me due to their freakish proportions, the stories were fine but forgettable, and combat was good but obstructed by Hideki Kamiya's obsession with putting on-the-rails shooting sections in his action games.
Why do you keep doing this?
Here's the thing though, everything I just said wholly applies to Bayonetta 3, and despite that, I think I love this game. Like when I finished Bayonetta 1 and 2, I had no desire to ever return to those games. Yet Bayonetta 3 has left me excited to play through the game again on the hardest difficulty. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, especially when the game's ambition outstrips its reach in so many areas. Yet there's something to be said about playing a game where you can feel the love and care that developers put into it. And that's precisely what Bayonetta 3 is, an experience that the right kind of player will fall in love with, but one where another kind of player will consider it nothing more than a dumb action game. So hopefully this review can help you figure out which one you are. So how about we address the most obvious critique first? Bayonetta 3 does not look good.
You look terrible.
The game manages to impress in key moments, and combat is just dripping in spectacle. However, if you decide to slow the action down and zoom in on the environments, you probably won't like what you see. Such as when I decided to look behind this beautiful waterfall, only to see it transform into an undulating pile of goop on the other side.
This doesn't look good.
It's tempting to blame these visual woes on the Switch, but that's only partially fair. Without Nintendo, this game would not have been made, so getting mad that it's stuck on the Switch ignores reality Platinum faced when trying to get this game made. Still, it seems Platinum was unwilling to compromise this vision for what they could actually realize on the Switch, and it shows. The game just released and it's already begging for a remaster, but in the interim, I don't think too many people will be using Bayonetta 3's photo mode. The premise of the game finds Bayonetta's world under attack from a multiversal threat known as Singularity, who reminded me of Infinite from Sonic Forces whenever he was on screen. Singularity has already destroyed multiple universes, and it's up to Bayonetta and crew to find 5 MacGuffins and save the multiverse. Along for the ride is series newcomer Viola, a brash katana-wielding Umbran witch that players will control for a significant portion of the game. Together with her demon cat Cheshire, Viola is used to explain much of the plot to the player. There's also supposed to be an intriguing subplot around her true identity, but it's one that an average 5-year-old or a casual anime fan will figure out in 2 seconds. And it's crazy how much this gets played up because the game waits so long to tell you the obvious. Viola essentially takes the role of Nero from Devil May Cry 4, a new character that risks fans' ire by taking the spotlight away from the series' mainstay. Whether you mind this depends on how much you love Bayonetta as a character and how much you like Viola. In a strictly narrative sense, I didn't find Viola to be that offensive. By the end, I even liked her. The gameplay, however, was a different story for reasons that will be discussed later. The multiversal setting allows players to interact with different versions of Bayonetta, and seeing the various iterations of Bayonetta in action is the best part of the game, so it's a shame that you don't see that much interaction between them. Side characters Luca and Jean also play more integral roles in the story this time around. Still, each of their narrative beats fail for me in different ways. Jean is essentially given a side quest that keeps her on the fringes of the story for most of the game, whereas Luca suddenly becomes so important to the story that he starts getting anime power-ups that make me question whether I misunderstood something from the previous games. In the end, I have to admit that I enjoyed how the story wrapped things up for these characters. I just feel like it skipped a few steps to get there. Those who will love this story will likely have these things in common. They love these characters, they have a high tolerance for anime tropes, and their ship became canon. So let's talk combat. 80% of the time, it's awesome. Combat is a kinetic ballet of tight combos appended by wicked weaves and cinematic finishers. Witch Time, which competes with Nier Automata for the best counter in gaming history, is still endlessly fun to pull off. Gone are weapon pickups and torture attacks have been revamped, but in their place are a bevy of weapons that are some of the craziest and most creative I've ever seen in an action game. It's clear that Bayonetta 3's combat has been influenced a lot by Astral Chain, an earlier Platinum title where players control 2 characters in combat. The borrowed elements namely include being able to summon a partner to finish combos, counter, and otherwise wreak havoc, except in this case you're summoning enslaved denizens of the underworld. This adds an entirely new dimension to combat as you can switch between demon summons on the fly, and depending on which weapon Bayonetta is using, she can incorporate various aspects of her demons into her combat style. Yet not all these combat elements work as seamlessly as they should. For one, summoning demons to do battle requires Bayonetta to sit still, and while you can preload a few attacks to allow your demon to operate somewhat autonomously, I never enjoyed how they slowed down combat. Instead, summons feel more like a win button if you're struggling during combat, because once you summon them, typically there's nothing on screen that can stand a chance. I say typically because some boss characters have the ability to one-shot summons to prevent you from abusing them. But I don't know, if you have a mechanic in your action game that's so easily abused, then maybe it shouldn't be there. For a franchise with such a focus on elegant and technical combo strings, being able to summon a giant kaiju at any time during a fight to bludgeon your enemies to death feels a little crude. But ultimately, if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. And frankly, I didn't find myself using the summons unless required. The majority of my time was spent stepping on enemies with Bayonetta's giant stilettos. Now, Viola sections constitute the 20% of the time that I didn't enjoy combat. This character plays like a worse version of Bayonetta in so many ways that I wonder why the developers thought it was a good idea to let you play as her. She only has one weapon and one summon to Bayonetta's multiple, and while she can do witch time, it's activated by parrying, not dodging. And in many instances, landing this parry does not leave you with enough time to even respond. Nero in DMC4 was similarly limited when compared to Dante, but he set himself apart by being able to grab and throw enemies. There is nothing Viola does that Bayonetta can't do easier or better, aside from one mechanic that she gets midway through the game, but I won't spoil that here. Gracefully though, the majority of your time in combat is spent with Bayonetta, and I plan to run through Viola's levels as quickly as possible on my next playthrough of the game. I should also mention that boss fights in this game, while easy, are amazing when it comes to spectacle. And while I don't want to spoil these here, know that when you play these bosses, you are in for some amazing references to pop culture and video games. The last thing I'll talk about is level design. Platinum put a lot of effort into making these levels fun to explore. They're fairly open and littered with collectibles and secrets you can use to customize Bayonetta and buy items in Rodin's shop, which I found to be pretty useless for a majority of the game. Since you now use a skill tree to purchase new moves, Rodin's shop loses a lot of its former utility, becoming little more to me than a place to buy trinkets. And since I had to skip this overly long animation every time I wanted to access the store, I found myself ignoring it for most of my playthrough. There are also combat challenges in each level that provide upgrade items for Bayonetta's health and magic. Most of them are pretty well designed, actually teaching you how to play the game better, but there are more than a few that are pretty bad. Such as this one where the game wants you to use witch time to stay on the stage, but since you can't control an enemy's attack and you're constantly being pulled off screen by some unseen force, this just turns into a frustrating mess.
This isn't fair!
Thankfully though, challenges like these are few and far between, and you'll likely be able to choose your way through them. The best part about the levels though are exploring them with Bayonetta's new traversal abilities. I mentioned earlier that depending on the weapon, Bayonetta could adopt various aspects of her demons in combat. This also applies to traversal. Whether you want to jump around with rocket arms or climb walls as a sexy spider lady, or simply get a triple jump as a frog princess, there is sure to be some way of traversal that you love. And for me, it's a huge win anytime a game can make the process of moving from point A to point B fun. Demon summons also play a critical role in navigating levels. Each level requires a particular demon to solve puzzles, and frankly this can be hit or miss because some demons have far smoother controls than others. My major critique with level design are the missions where you're forced to play with Jeanne. Her levels are side-scrolling shooters that feel so disconnected from the main game, I couldn't wait to be done with them. And while they're side missions, rest assured that you have to complete these to finish the story. I've come to tolerate the shmup sections in Bayonetta games, but Hideki Kamiya seems obsessed with adding random genres to his action games. Sometimes it works, like with the hacking sections in Nier Automata. But most of the times, I just want to play the action game I paid for. Ultimately though, I did appreciate Bayonetta 3's levels for their open design and the variety of environments you get to explore. This is a game I've come to love despite its flaws. It swings for the fences and doesn't always land, but in the areas where it does, it truly resonates. So I'll say if you're someone who even casually enjoys action games and has a high tolerance for anime nonsense, I think you'll likely enjoy this game a lot. However, if you think what you see on screen is simply button mashy silliness, then this probably isn't the game for you. Any player who picks up this game though will find an imperfect product but made with love and passion. This has been Harlan Gaming, thanks for watching.